Ladies and gentlemen, Marco Rubio, RFK Jr., President Trump, Elon Musk all have higher favorability numbers. They're more popular and they're more admired and liked than AOC. She had a 30% favorability, unfavorable 40%. She was underwater 10 points. This was months back. But ladies and gentlemen, I hope ZORAN MAMDANI does well in New York. If his career his career trajectory is similar to Cuomo and Eric Adams, when there's no longer a use, when he surpasses his utility within the Democratic Party, the same thing, I hope it doesn't happen for him, but the same thing will happen. Eric Adams, Cuomo, Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, Democrats either cheated, forced out of the presidential contest, went after in terms of New York politics. So ZORAN MAMDANI is a democratic socialist. His policies are not popular nationwide. That's why Democrats don't run on Green New Deal, single payer, $30 minimum wage, grocery stores run by cities, higher corporate taxes. Billionaires and millionaires are going to leave New York, which makes the working class suffer. This is antithetical to Bernie Sanders and Mamdani and AOC, but unfortunately, it's the truth. Especially since, well, we can go on forever, but hit subscribe to this channel right now. Nationwide, they're not popular. Real Clear Politics, JD Vance already beats Newsom, and then, of course, you have the public relations, Newsom +8, but he's defeating Newsom in the latest poll, defeated him in the other poll, and they tied. So in 3 polls, he's basically defeating Newsom. And Newsom +8 is an absurd poll. But let's listen to this. If ZORAN MAMDANI is the face of the Democratic Party, JD Vance just won the presidency in 2028. Okay? Hit subscribe to this channel. I used to be on that side politically. If you read my writing on hagoodman.com, you could see I used to be on that side politically. If you read my writing in The Federalist, you can see that I'm more conservative on a lot of things, and I support President Trump wholeheartedly because I want to limit endless military interventions and wars. I want to bring home manufacturing with tariffs. Enforcing immigration laws is important. If you don't like ICE, then Mamdani and AOC and others should campaign in 2026 on repealing deportation statutes. They won't do that, just like they won't implement the Medicare for All or single payer or banning fracking bill. We can go on forever. The biggest hypocrites on the planet. If they don't cheat a candidate, it's because they just want to use the candidate to pretend they care about certain values within an enclave or a fiefdom of Democratic or liberal area or political area, whether it's like New York or Seattle or LA. Nationwide, they're not running on these things. Hit subscribe to this channel right now. Go to H.A. Goodman's other channel. Check this out.
Everybody is leaving New York and New Jersey because of high taxes, regulation, dislike of business, and other crazy things. $700 billion worth of income have left. 3 million people have left. That's incredible. So let's talk about why, wherefore. Steve Moore, host of More Money on WABC Radio, and Liz Peek, syndicated columnist and Fox News contributor. Steve Moore, this is from the hotline, Prosperity Hotline. 3 million people have left New York and New Jersey in the last how many years? 10 years or so. That is a lot of people, and they've all gone to Dallas, Texas, or Miami, Florida. Why is that?
Well, by the way, that's probably 5 congressional seats that those states will lose in the next decennial census because so many people are leaving. And I just want to emphasize a point. That's the net number of people who have left. In other words, that's the number of people who have left minus the number of people who've come in. So it's a huge exodus. This is the big story in America today, Larry. It's very simple. The blue states, especially those blue states with high taxes, what am I talking about? New York, New Jersey, California, Illinois, are being bled to death. And where are they going, Larry? You know exactly where they're going. They're going to where our buddy Art Laffer is. They're going to Tennessee. They're going to Texas. They're going to Florida. Gee, what do those states have in common? Oh, they don't have any income tax at all. So you pay 14% in New York, or you can pay zero in Miami or zero in Dallas, where I am right now. And I'm telling you, if MAMDANI wins this election and he raises that tax rate another by 2 or 3 percentage points, I believe that the exodus of people who make 6, 7, 8 figures is going to be out of the city. And then, Larry, who's going to pay the bills?
Yeah, well, he's going to try to keep taxing everybody. Liz.
And this is what happens with Bernie Sanders AOC. If MAMDANI wants free everything, and 1% of New Yorkers pay over half of state and federal income tax within the city, and they leave, then who's going to pay? He's going to have to either raise taxes, or the city's going to go into a deficit and risk bankruptcy. They're going to risk bankruptcy if the city cannot pay for what MAMDANI wants. That's why socialism doesn't work. It's rooted in this fake and phony morality. But every socialist country is poor. Every communist country has been poor. And so poverty and socialism are synonymous. That is a fact. There's zero rebuttal for that. Absolutely zero rebuttal. Find somebody who lived in a socialist country. Ask why they came to the United States of America.
Peak, the other thing that's so interesting is you've got economic illiteracy, so we're going to have rent controls as much as possible. In fact, I have MAMDANI. Here's a little sound from Mr. MAMDANI on rent controls. Take a listen.
Mm-hmm. And freezing the rent, right? This is about 2.5 million New Yorkers in a city of 8.5 million. The mayor has the power to freeze their rent. I am saying I'm going to do that for 4 years.
Freezing the rent for 4 years.
And then if the owners of the buildings have to pay for plumbing, or they have to pay for a new elevator, or fixing an elevator, or plumbing, or the roof, or whatever it is that they need to fix, if he freezes rent, what will happen to tenants? What will happen to buildings that are unsafe, that don't meet code? And so freezing rent is fantastic. It sounds great. But if it prevents the people who own the buildings from maintaining the buildings, the tenants suffer.
Will really be a destroyer of the city and its homes. And it would just be the worst imaginable thing. And this guy loves it.
It's amazing. He went to Bowdoin College, paid $65,000 a year, presumably, to learn what, Larry? It's kind of hard to figure, right? This is a policy that every economist in the world, liberal, center, right wing, says is completely unworkable. Why? Because if landlords can't make money and costs do go up year after year, so they lose money every year that there's a rent freeze, they stop investing in the housing stock. The housing stock deteriorates and declines. And guess what? At the end of it, there is a spike in rents every single time. This is not rocket science. It's common sense.
Socialists don't know anything about the economy. They don't know much about the economy. For example, why don't socialists or democratic socialists, and I say this with all due respect, I love the working class. That's why I vote Trump, because he's the absolute best for the working class in terms of the economy. We had record low poverty with Trump in his first tenure, before Democrats shut down every single state because of you-know-what. We had record highs in household median income. Biden had 21% increase in prices. Inflation was through the roof. Then he flooded strategic petroleum reserves. There goes the Green New Deal. But the thing is, why don't democratic socialists, and this is an honest question, why don't they raise the minimum wage to $500 an hour? Why stop at $30 an hour? $30 an hour, they're already going to cut workers' hours and time. Forget benefits. They're just going to make sure that not everyone works to attain the benefits. They'll cut hours, and they might go out of business. And then there's less jobs. But why stop at $30? Why not go $500? Why not go $1,000? Why not free rent? So you can take all of these policies and extend them and make them even more outlandish. And one would think that with the socialist mindset, they would make sense. Why doesn't it make sense for a socialist or democratic socialist to have a $500 minimum wage? Why?
But I have to say, it's only one of the areas where Zoran Mamdani defies common sense, defies logic, and has these ridiculous platitudinous responses that are completely unspecific. I think it's horrifying that so many of his followers are simply not thinking through what he's saying.
Well, I don't know. I mean, that's the trouble here. I don't know what they're thinking. They may just love socialism.
They're thinking it's moral. It's a religion. They're generally atheists. And they view that, you know, they don't, the issue is that it's a religion. It's morality that exists in the here and now and through politics. And liberals and progressives and socialists view themselves to be morally superior. Yet when Biden was in office, everything bad that could have taken place took place. Russia was invaded. Prices went up through the roof. There's scandal, auto pen. I mean, we can go on forever. They tried to imprison their direct political rival and President Trump. None of it worked. Thank God he won. I mean, like, okay, Democrats won regional or statewide in Virginia or in New Jersey, but these are Democratic-run states. He almost won New Jersey. In the national election, the Democrat that wins in Virginia is not going to win nationwide. J.D. Vance is poised to win, especially since Mamdani is now the face, or very important, like AOC, within the Democratic Party. But Democrats don't want Medicare for all, single payer, Green New Deal. That's why Biden flooded the country full of strategic petroleum reserves to lower the cost of fuel and energy prices, because they were going through the roof and making everything more expensive. City-run grocery stores are not going to work. If they did, I would love them. That would be fantastic. But the Soviets tried that in Moscow and the Soviet Union. It didn't work.
I don't know. I mean, my other favorite one is Soviet supermarkets. He's a big fan of that. Soviet supermarkets, you know, that's just what we need. Seymour, on a more serious note, look, this shutdown has caused a good deal of hardship, air traffic controllers and people in the military. But here's the point. 42 million Americans are on food stamps. Now, you wrote about this again today, and 42 million on food stamps. I think there has to be.
That's in large part because of outsourcing. That's in large part because cities that had manufacturing plants, businesses, corporations that employed a lot of people, whether it's in aerospace or any other industry, left. They left and they outsourced technology. They outsourced to other countries. That's what the tariffs are about, to bring manufacturing back. God forbid we bring manufacturing back, which is exactly what President Trump wants. Helps the working class, helps get people off of food stamps. Have you ever heard a Democrat talk about why people are on food stamps? Maybe their policies have something to do with keeping poverty, keeping the status quo of poverty. That's why Trump wanted economic opportunity zones. That's why he wants tariffs. But let's continue.
An audit there. That just does not. That sounds like there's some waste, fraud, and abuse. That sounds like, for example, able-bodied people are getting food stamps and maybe they should go out to work. I mean, I don't want to take food from anyone's mouth, but I'm just saying 42 million, that number, I think, has really, it's skyrocketed during COVID. I'm not sure it's come down much, if at all, during the prosperity. What do you think about this?
Well, I think it's an outrage. It's a disgrace that the richest country in the world, the United States, somehow has 42 million people, or 1 out of every 9 families, that say they can't put food on their table. And I think what's happened is we've created a culture of dependency here. And once you said it very well. Once they go on food stamps, they don't come off. And do you remember under Obama when they expanded food stamps and all the Democrats said, "Oh, it's a stimulus to the local." They were encouraging people to go on food stamps because they said it's a stimulus to the local economy. Here is the problem why the costs of that program have escalated and so many people are on. Because you've got I think it's 21 states, all of them blue states, that will not even subject themselves to a federal audit. So we don't know how many illegal immigrants are on. We don't know how many people are getting food stamps from many states. There's stories of people getting food stamps from 3 or 4 states. We don't know how many of these people are able-bodied. You and I and Liz, I think, feel very strongly, if we're going to give people a benefit and they're able-bodied and they're of working age, they should get off their butts, stop watching TV, stop playing computer games, and get a job.
Joining us, podcast host, former Doge spokesperson. Look who's here, Katie Miller. Katie, it's great to see you on the show. So what'd you take on everything we just said? Because former President Barack Obama, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, they both will not endorse MAMDANI. After Obama endorsed Bill de Blasio, he was far left too.
It is not surprising that all of the National Democratic Party is running away from MAMDANI, right? It should be very simple for Chuck Schumer to answer who he voted for in New York as a New Yorker. But why is that the case? It's because what's going to happen, and when MAMDANI wins tonight, because he will, because it is a protest vote against everything that's happened, whether that be Donald Trump, whether that be Israel and Gaza, that's what MAMDANI is. He is a democratic socialist that New Yorkers feel like isn't a socialist. And what will happen is New York will fall. It will become the murder capital of the world. You will not be able to fund the police. There will be no police. It will be where every single high-paying tax dollar of New York flees the state, flees the city.
And that's important to okay, if you were a millionaire or a billionaire in New York, okay, you'd have to be a fool to remain there. And I'm not telling anyone to leave New York. New York City is the most, it used to be, hopefully it still is, the most beautiful, vibrant, wonderful city, one of the most amazing places in the world. Okay, now you have crime, you have other issues, and instead of addressing these issues, Democrats have doubled down. The issue is that if MAMDANI wants to make everything free, great. How is he going to pay for it? If he's going to pay for it by increasing corporate taxes, then corporations will leave. Is the rebuttal corporations won't leave? Well, they will leave. They're already talking about leaving. There was one survey that said hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers would leave the city, and a great many are business owners. So, I mean, like, this is the center of capitalism. And you're trying to infuse socialism in the heart of capitalism within the world, New York City.
And we've already heard that 1 million New Yorkers are going to flee. And that is because what is going to happen is you're going to see a major city in a downfall, in a free fall. And what's going to happen in that case is you're going to see the National Republicans run and try to tie every single candidate to MAMDANI, and it will be wildly unpopular because that's not what the voters of Virginia want. It's not what the voters of New Jersey want.
Right. Do you think the Trump administration is really going to let the New York City voters and residents suffer under MAMDANI? I mean, we know that Democrat Governor Kathy Hochul said,
if he defunds the police, then then the outcome will be terrible. If the city-run grocery stores go the way of Soviet grocery stores in Moscow, all you would have to do is ask somebody who lived in the Soviet Union or Moscow or anywhere in Russia or the Soviet Union during the 80s. Okay, if you lived in the Soviet Union during the 80s, what happened to the grocery stores? Well, there were lines for mayonnaise. So this isn't rocket science, and it's not ancient history. This is just several decades ago.
Said MAMDANI's tax hikes, that she will try to stop them, that she's not going to let it happen because they're going to hit the middle and working class voters, and that she'll try to move to block it. But, so what can the Trump administration do to help out New Yorkers suffering under this?
I think the greatest gift to President Trump will be seeing what happens when you elect a socialist to be your mayor. And no, President Trump cares so very deeply about every American, whether you live in New York or California or Chicago. And he will not let the murder get murder rates get beyond control, he will push the National Guard in or do what he needs to do to protect Americans. But in that same time, I'm sure he's going to give Mamdani the runway to see what happens when you allow a socialist in control of a major city in our country. And it will not be pretty. But what they're doing here in New York is self-sabotage, and it will only be good for the future of the Republican Party.
It's a financial.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I agree 100%. And I wish New York the best. I hope, you know what? God willing, I'm wrong, and Mamdani does very well. The problem is that socialism never does well. There's never been a city or a country where socialism brought prosperity. Now, the absurd, like an imbecile would respond with, well, what about these government programs? Like, that's not socialism, you very intelligent imbecile. That doesn't just simply saying that, oh, what about a government program? That's not socialism. That's a government program within a capitalist structure. Okay, every capitalist country in the world has government programs. Big deal. The issue is that you don't want to overtax the citizenry. You don't want taxes to push industry out of your city, because then the working class suffers. There's a very popular socialist magazine. It goes for like $20, like $15 on the newsstand. It's hilarious. Who pays $15 for a magazine? The socialists who are selling the magazine. They want you to pay $15. These are the wonderful people who don't like capitalism.
Maybe you knew this, but I hadn't seen this tape until it came out on X Post a couple of days ago, but where Mamdani literally is using a Marxist line to talk about public housing. He wants to get rid of private housing in this city. Possibly it's his goal for the whole nation. Let me just roll that and get your comment. Roll it.
We'll have to go beyond the market. We won't decommodify housing overnight, but we know what we have to do, and we have history to guide us.
Decommoditize housing.
Where's the history? Where's the precedent that that's a good thing?
That is Marxist newspeak for essentially taking the value out of your house that people have put incredible amounts of money into. I mean, is he serious? This is pure Marxism.
I think where we have to ask, is he serious? Is he says he has history to guide us. History of what? What has happened in the Soviet Union? What's happened in every failed socialist experiment we've ever seen throughout U.S. history? We've seen is the success of capitalism. And what this individual, this assemblyman, ZORAN, is trying to do is he is trying to use this socialist playbook to win people over, only to destroy our city. This is not the only socialist playbook rule he's taken out. He is constantly using them. He's constantly using rhetoric like this. And on a day like today, where we're releasing the hostages, he's posting about celebrating UNRWA.
By the way, we know New Yorkers not better than anybody, because the same thing happened in Chicago with places like Cabrini Green, et cetera. Public housing ends up as filthy, drug-infested, crime-infested areas. It's not something that people desire to live in.
The worst landlord in New York City is our public housing here. And what he wants to do is make everything a public commodity just like that. And you can ask anyone who lives in one of those housing projects whether they like the way it's run or not, and you're going to get the same answer.
By the way, has he said anything about this peace deal? I haven't heard anything. He was talking about Israel and Gaza about 5 times a day.
Police. That is the reason they took the job to begin with, something that they feel good about. It becomes very, very hard to get up and show up for work. That's number one. Yeah. Number two, at the very least, they're going to be extremely defensive. But let's remember something. Aside from the fact that they're going to be in a defensive crouch, you have less than, let's say, 5 years on, which there's been a lot of hiring recently. You're going to start to look around to yourself and you're going to say, you know what? A, the city's going broke because of this guy. B, I'm the bad guy. What cops talk about
the city could risk bankruptcy. That was in the 70s. New York risked bankruptcy. That could happen again with Mamdani. And that's not like, this is not hyperbolic or apoplectic. This is a serious potential consequence. If you want free things, you have to find out. If you want social services, you have to find out who's going to pay for the social services. And if the businesses, if the people that own the corporations and businesses within New York leave New York, then those jobs leave also. This isn't rocket science. Mamdani is literally going to hurt the working class with his policies, not help.
When they sit in police cars, when they're between answering jobs, it's not, I'm worried about getting shot. It's, I'm worried about getting indicted, because that's becoming more and more prevalent. They feel like they have a target on their backs. And so what's going to happen is they're going to look around, they're going to say, Florida's offering a $30,000 signing bonus. South Carolina is offering $30,000 in immediate pay raises and a take-home car and a better lifestyle. And I'm not the bad guy. Who would stick around?
Yeah.
And that's what is going to happen.
The city's already broke, Jake. You work with this guy. Is he smart enough to realize that he can't print money, that either he gets a bailout from Washington, which ain't going to happen with Donald Trump in the White House, or he's going to have to cut back on his plans of free this, free that, free everything?
I think he wants to turn, as we've seen lately, our buses into roving shelters, as who's going to use a free bus all the time, as we've seen in other cases. But the reality is New York's are going to face a serious situation when they see his plans implemented in the way they do. And right now we're seeing his Albany Democratic allies saying they're going to fall in line. They're going to do what he wants. They're going to raise taxes the way he wants, and New Yorkers are going to pay the ultimate price for it.
By the way, there's no such thing as a free bus. There's no such thing as a free lunch, but somebody's got to pay for the gas. Somebody's got to pay the drivers. Somebody's got to pay for the buses and the upkeep. I mean, to say that free bus service is going to be possible is not true.
Look, he is using the Soviet playbook. Just lie to them, right?
Yeah.
Free healthcare would be fantastic in America. That's why I used to be. You can go to hagoodman.com. You can read my writing in the Huffington Post, Salon, The Hill. I was a big Bernie Sanders booster. Okay, one of the biggest Bernie Sanders booster on the internet, according to the Huffington Post, the unofficial scribe of Sanders' most hardcore voters, according to the Washington Post. Democrats do not want Mamdani or Bernie Sanders' or AOC's plan for the future. They lie to their voters. I saw this and learned this in 2016. I'm like a hologram from 2016. They lied to their voters. They don't believe in Green New Deal. That's why Biden depleted these strategic petroleum reserves. That's not good for the environment. Okay? They don't believe in single payer. That's why not one state has government-run health care. And there's not one bill in Congress. They don't want to ban fracking, which is what they were talking about. They don't want to add Supreme Court justices, which is what they were talking about. There's literally nothing that they claimed to. Do they want a $30 minimum wage nationwide? Do they want free buses nationwide? Do they want grocery stores run by the federal government, by state government? They're not going to implement any of Mamdani's or AOC's or Bernie Sanders's policies nationwide. They're going to run from them. They exist in the Democratic Party to funnel ideologues, left-leaning, like indoctrinated, they're good, wonderful people. I used to be one of them. They're good, wonderful, beautiful people who don't really care about the economic issues associated with these. The same thing. I didn't think about, well, what is the impact of banning fracking? Could we afford as a country Medicare for all? These things, I never thought about those things. But once you think about those things, you say, well, can't vote for this socialist. They'd bankrupt the country. But again, they exist. They cheated Bernie Sanders. They forced Biden out. They went after Eric Adams. They went after Andrew Cuomo. Well, Cuomo was one of the worst governors ever. And so Democrats, they'll go after their own candidates once the utility is gone. They could go after AOC if she falls out of line within the Democratic Party, accusing her of campaign finance violations. Hans von Spakovsky, former Federal Election Commission chairman, stated she committed campaign finance violations, possibly linked to a couple of YouTubers, or more than a couple, possibly, potentially, as the Honorable James Comey says, not accusing anyone of anything.
We have New Jersey Democrat Congressman, Josh Gottheimer. It's great to have you here. He said he's looking for a few sane Democrats with a backbone to get the government reopened. Will he find them today?
if you're asking me, am I going to find them? Dana, we've been working, Democrats and Republicans in the House and the Senate for weeks now to find a way forward. I don't think any of us should be pointing fingers. I think we should just be finding a way to get through this, get the government back open, help people with those premiums, which are going to be up an average of 18% in the coming year, which, these notices are going out now. Open enrollment for people to sign up is this Saturday, November 1st. And people are in for a shock, and they're calling me saying, I can't believe what you're talking about here. And if we don't get help on these premiums with this tax credit, you're talking about in Jersey, where I live, a family of four, on average, if they're on the ACA, going up $20,000 their premiums in a year. So you can imagine with all these other costs that they're dealing with, whether it's childcare, or energy bills, or food, or things affected by the tariffs, people need help. And that's what I think we should all be focused on, Democrats and Republicans.
Would you call on Senate Democrats to just go ahead and pass the CR so that that won't happen and that you can continue to negotiate?
Well, I think it doesn't solve the health.
Socialist candidate here for the mayor's race. This is a comment that he made about the IDF and the NYPD. This is from 2023. What?
ZORAN Mandami, 34-year-old Democratic socialist. He's the
communist, not socialist, communist.
So what if Mandami becomes mayor?
It's going to be hard for me as the president to give a lot of money to New York because if you have a communist running New York, all you're doing is wasting the money you're sending there.
As New Yorkers pick their next mayor, it could shape up to be a battle royale between Washington and the Big Apple. President Trump doubling down and had more to say tonight.
He took to Truth Social just moments ago saying this, quote, Mandani has no chance to bring it back to its former glory. We must also remember this, a vote for Curtis Sliwa, who looks much better without the beret, exclamation point.
I love Curtis Sliwa. I think it's fantastic. I'm not a New Yorker. What do I know? I think Curtis Sliwa is fantastic. He really should be mayor of New York, but let's continue.
Is a vote for Mandani. Whether you personally like Andrew Cuomo or not, you really have no choice. You must vote for him and hope he does a fantastic job. Joining us live on set to react, Fox News contributor and former NYPD Inspector Paul Morrow, the Federalist elections correspondent Brianna Lyman, and activist Zach Sage Fox. And he is the CEO of Fat Camp Films and works with Cuomo on social media campaigns. Great to see all of you. Paul, somebody said to me earlier today, we've said for almost 25 years, never forget, and we forgot.
Yeah, we used to say in the Intelligence Bureau where I worked that the further we get from 9/11, the closer we get to 9/10. And that seems to be the dynamic here. For a lot of people,
if God forbid, God forbid, God forbid, something like that happened again, what political party, what politicians would sheepishly try to
and we forgot.
Yeah, we used to say in the Intelligence Bureau where I worked that the further we get from 9/11, the closer we get to 9/10. And that seems to be the dynamic here. For a lot of people who are Mamdani's age or younger, 9/11 is something of a comic book. It's something that happened far, far away to different people that has nothing to do with them. But for a lot of us, it's still a date that redounds very heavily to today. And when I hear the possibility of federal funding being cut, my mind goes right there, because we get a lot of federal funding in this town for counterterrorism operations. Units I were in depended in many ways upon funds that were given by the DHS grants. That'll hit home.
What do you expect ultimately for the voters to do when they show up to vote? Zach, what do you think?
Well, I am praying that Republicans and independents rally for Cuomo. Really, that is our shot at saving New York City right now. And listen, I know Cuomo is not first on their list to be mayor, but I think they can agree that he is a moderate Democrat compared to a socialist, or as President Trump calls him, a communist. And honestly, this is the most power that Republicans have ever had in New York City. Is tonight through tomorrow. You guys can change the entire outcome of this election, and it is so.
And Republicans will continue to gain power. This is the best thing for the Republican Party, President Trump, in New York, New Jersey. It's the best thing nationwide. Sorry about that. The computer froze for a second.
So important, not just for New York City, but this is going to send ripples turning into waves around the country and the world for the anti-Semites of the world, the anti-capitalists of the world, the people who hate America. This will be a victory for them, whether we want to admit it or not. And so, as Republicans with those values, I pray that you guys help do the right thing and walk across the aisle to elect Andrew Cuomo, who's running as an independent. And I hope we'll lead that way.
But Brianna, I've talked to a lot of people to at least understand why somebody would vote for Mamdani. And I'd boil it down to a hatred of the rich, a hatred. They want to blame somebody for how expensive it is to live here.
People vote for Mamdani or AOC or Bernie Sanders because they think it's moral. I understand, because I understand why people vote for Bernie Sanders. They think it's moral, just. They think that they're candidates that would wreck the status quo and help the working class, and that they're compassionate. This is the opposite of what took place in the past 10 years. Bernie Sanders was cheated. He said nothing. The people who told the world that he was cheated, he never defended. He can't even admit that he was cheated in 2016. Biden was forced out after he won his primary. They went after they tried to go after Cuomo. Well, Cuomo, maybe he was a terrible governor and potentially did a lot of bad things. But they went after him. They went after Eric Adams. AOC is important within the Democratic Party, like Bernie Sanders was, to funnel voters into the Democratic Party. She gets, I think, the majority or a good percentage of her funding outside of New York. And so they don't run on their alleged value system. They don't want nationally. They don't want Medicare for all, Green New Deal. They don't want any of Mamdani's policies nationally. That should tell you something about the Democratic Party and what they truly believe in.
And in essence, I don't know what Mamdani stands for other than figuratively just burning it all down.
Yeah, I think it's threefold. I think there are a few people with genuine Marxist convictions who actually like Marxism, socialism, communism. They're voting for Mamdani. I think you then have people who have no idea what any of those things are, but they hear, oh, lower cost, free buses. That sounds good, right? And I think right now we're having this conversation nationwide about SNAP. People are complaining that the government is not giving them money to buy food. That is socialism right there. You don't like it, but you want it in New York City. I think the last point is people, unfortunately, are just going out because he's a slick-talking politician. And we're talking about Curtis Sliwa and Andrew Cuomo. Look, Curtis can siphon votes away from Cuomo. At the end of the day, even if Cuomo was to win tomorrow based on nostalgia and name recognition, he is not governing a base that he is used to. This is a much more organized and radical base that Cuomo is not one of them, and he has never governed people of that particular ideology in such a small demographic.
That's why I think he would, though, lead more as an independent. I think he would be leading as a center-left Democrat.
But Cuomo was basically kicked out of the Democratic Party, or the Democrats turned on Cuomo. They investigated a number of his staffers. He was accused of the typical thing, a terrible thing, that Democrats in a typical or normal fashion ignore when it's the candidates that they want, and then believe when it's candidates that they don't like. So when Biden or Cuomo or any other Democrat is accused of acting inappropriately, we'll just use that phrase, no, that's ignored. If it's anyone, Trump, anyone else, you have to believe. And so that's the way Democrats work. And that's the thing. They're nationwide. Look, if they win in Virginia tonight, fantastic. In New Jersey, okay, great. Nationwide, we're talking 2028. We're talking on a national stage. They might get back. Right now, it doesn't look good for Democrats in terms of the midterms. They could get the House back, but then they'll impeach Trump again, and that'll hurt their political party for 28. So it's like a moth to a flame. They can't stop the politics that they're used to. They can't. And by the way, they can't stop. By the way, there's going to be indictments from here until November of next year, probably 20 to 30 indictments they're going to have to then defend.
And I'm coming from within the campaign too. I really believe he's going to be a mayor for all New Yorkers. I think he's aware of what you just said as well.
Yeah, and to be fair, I don't think he should necessarily try to appease the radical base of the Democratic Party. Look, the entire country shifted right this past election. There was no mandate for any Democrats in leadership to go out and endorse Mamdani, and yet they've done that. And it's because they know that the Democratic base is shifting left, and they are becoming the party of openly Marxist.
What we're going to see right now is the opposition between socialism and capitalism. And you talked about funds being withheld. And when people realize in New York City, the ones particularly that aren't really sure why they're voting for him, find out that certain services are going to be withheld or certain funds are going to be withheld, what's going to be the reaction in New York City?
You know, I can't believe that they don't have the wit to understand that if they vote for what you're talking about, it's going to occur. He's not being very coy about what he's promising to do. I think the problem I think that a lot of the younger demographic who are going to vote for him don't quite perceive is the fact that this guy's agenda tracks a lot closer to Beijing than it does to Washington, D.C. And I find it no accident that, in fact, he went over the top thanks to TikTok. He came out of nowhere in about a week. Nobody had heard of the guy. All of a sudden, he was the front runner. And now we start to hear from various think tanks and studies, something I've been saying from the beginning, which is that algorithm was gamed to his benefit. My point is that I think a lot of them was sold a bill of goods. They don't quite realize what they're getting into, but it looked good on TikTok. And we got to him too late, the oppo, for lack of a better term. The opposition research. It came out too close to the election. That's why now his numbers are dropping. If we had another month, I actually don't think he'd be the favorite anymore.
That's true. Not many Americans have heard him speak about a lot of things. Just like AOC on a national stage, she doesn't debate. She doesn't want to debate anybody. She's not really she's not out there pushing any specific issue. When is the last time she talked about a bill that helps the working class, or a bill that is a Medicare for all single payer, or she had a Green New Deal resolution, never talked about it since. On a national stage, do you ever hear AOC? You haven't heard Mamdani. And you hear Bernie Sanders. He's like, oh, yeah, Bernie. I'm on a national. Trump is the most dangerous president of all time. But he's not on a national stage. Is Bernie Sanders talking about single payer health care? No. They don't. They're embarrassed of their own value system. That's the issue here. But it's all theater, and it's all this pseudo morality. They think socialism is just and good and helps the working class. The opposite. It hurts people. It hurts poor people. It causes poverty, and it hurts the working class. The evidence for that is human history, literally human history.
But the timing was quite slick. I think we're going to find out the hard way, as we found out in the past. But let's just remember something. This is a town that put Bill de Blasio in twice.
Right. So are the violent criminals that he'll let out of Rikers become his Red Army?
You know, what people don't realize is that baked into the cake, thanks to the de Blasio administration, is that we're going to go down by at least 30%, maybe more, in jail beds. That has nothing to do with bail reform. They instituted that when they closed Rikers. Rikers is being defunded now. They're going to go to the borough-based jails. The reason that matters is that is a hard metric. You can change everything you want. In Albany, you can finally change the laws up there, which, you know, good luck with it. Even if you do, there's no place to put the bad guys. We're going to go down. We don't lock up anybody now. Take it down 30%. Imagine what that's going to look like.
Right. It's the bad guys will keep the plebes and the proles in line.
New data revealing 14% of Americans have favorable views of communism. That includes more than a quarter of people.
You better believe the 14% of Americans that have favorable views of communism have never lived in a communist country. They've never lived in a communist country. The people living here that came from communist nations are like, thank God we live in America. They're one of the greatest Americans. Anyone who's here from any of the Soviet nations and they came here for a better life, they're the most pro-American. They love America because they're like, oh my God, I saved my family and myself from communism. But this is like Dungeons and Dragons for morally superior progressives and liberals and leftists and socialists and communists. You think it's like moral. It's so moral. It's like the working class suffers, literally suffers with socialism and communism. There's never been, ever, a socialist state that wasn't mired in poverty. Never. And that is a fact. And the rebuttal is, well, socialism and communism wasn't implemented correctly. It's like, well, no, you read Animal Farm, George Orwell's Animal Farm. It's never implemented correctly because of unfortunately, human nature. But anyway, let's continue.
30 years or younger and strong liberals who see communism in a positive light. Our next guest has seen the devastating impact of communist leadership firsthand during U.S. Army deployments in the Middle East and South America. Florida's Lieutenant Governor Jay Collins joining us now. Lieutenant Governor, thank you for being here. It's worth noting for our viewers, you are a highly decorated Special Forces Army combat veteran. You've seen this up close and personal. When you see numbers like this about, favorable rates of communism, what do you say?
Well, I don't think it's altogether surprising. That's why we've taken the stance we have in Florida. Under Governor Ron DeSantis, we've pushed back. And in fact, I ran a bill a couple of years ago that mandated truth in education on communism for K through 12.
By the way, the Cuban Americans in Miami and in Florida saved this country. They saved this country. God bless the Cuban Americans in Miami and Florida throughout this country. Because they left Cuba because it was communist, with socialist policies, communist policies, and they don't want that in America. And people who left, whether it's Cuba or the former Soviet Union, they don't want communist policies. The people who love communism are generally people who are wealthy or, not poor. Okay, maybe not extremely wealthy, but well-to-do or comfortable. Highly educated. Also generally atheist. Nothing wrong with being an atheist, but goes hand in hand. And completely unaware of the history of communism, whether it's in Cuba, whether it's in the Soviet Union, North Korea, and how it leads to complete abject poverty. Okay, socialism and communism lead to poverty. This is a fact.
Because we've seen this growing. They have taken over the education system, they being the far left, and they've started to indoctrinate our children. That's what happens. Doesn't surprise me at all. It's unfortunate. It always happens this way.
Are you concerned, Lieutenant Governor, that many of the voters, particularly those that may be younger, 30 and younger here in New York City, are about to elect a self-avowed socialist in ZORAN MAMDANI?
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. Of all the cities in our nation, why the city that never sleeps, New York City? It's heartbreaking to see that we're going to have to learn this lesson firsthand, but altogether surprising, certainly not. Heartbreaking, absolutely. You're going to see an exodus come into Florida because of this. People with wealth, people with opportunity are going to leave one more time. And I guess the last thing you can say about that is don't New York or Florida. Don't take your doctrine and your indoctrination and bring it down here.
Well said by Lieutenant Governor Jay Collins. Well said. If you are a liberal or progressive, God bless you, or leftist, you can't afford California or New York, or you can't afford a blue state, and you go to the South or you go to Florida, that's in the South, but you go to Florida or Texas, keep your politics back where you came from. Don't bring, if you left a Democratic blue state because of high taxes and because of inflation and because of cost of living, for the love of God, don't bring your politics into a red state. You're going to a red state for a better life, better cost of living, lower cost of living, a safer place. Don't bring your politics. If you like being a Democrat, stay in. Don't leave New York or California and try to make Texas or Florida or any other state that's red a blue state. It makes no sense, for the love of God. If you love a blue state, then stay there. But if you leave, obviously you're leaving because the politics stinks.
We're very free. We stand for freedom and liberty, and we want to keep it that way. So if you're going to come to Florida, you better start espousing how we do things here.
You know, Lieutenant Governor, to that point, we want to show our viewers, when you look at poverty rates in socialist communist nations, it's 91% in Venezuela, in Cuba, communist country.
Okay, and so here's the thing. American citizens from Venezuela, from Cuba, okay, from the former Soviet Union, okay, the citizens that have seen the terrible, terrible consequences of communism, the poverty. You have a tremendous amount of poverty. How is that good for the working class, for the love of God? The same God that socialists and communists don't believe in. How is that good? It's literally the antithesis of helping the working class. See, it's a pseudo-morality. Working class, man. Well, then why do you want poverty? What's good about poverty? What's about the working class? Then why make people poor with communism or socialism?
89%. North Korea, 60%, although I think that number might even be low. It's hard to get information there. But when you look at things like, the poverty rate in Cuba under communism, obviously Floridians are fully well aware, but yet you're having to lean in and push back on it. I don't understand that.
Yeah, it's pretty shocking. It truly is. I feel like we have to relearn all the old lessons. But, one of the things that was nuanced in our communism education bill was that we wanted to have survivors, people who lived through this, be a part of developing the curriculum. We want them to understand and share exactly what it is that's important for the youth to understand about how socialism, how communism happened across their nations prior. These are survivors of communism in Cuba, in Venezuela, in China, other nations that were there. And, frankly, they just want to push back because they came to America to live in freedom and, live and love what we have. It's sad to see this happen again, but we have to push back. We have to use our voice, and we can't stand on the sideline quiet anymore. We have to use our words, and we have to keep this travesty from happening in any other city. We can still make a difference in New York City. MAMDANI does not have to happen.
Well, it looks like it may, actually. We are watching that, but we give kudos to you, Lieutenant Governor, for pushing back and your leadership. You talk about using your voice. What about using your voice to jump into the gubernatorial race in Florida? Have you made any decision on whether or not you might run as well?
No, I appreciate that question. So, as I've said all along, this is a very big decision. I'm kind of tired of politicians stepping in and making it a ego-driven thing. This is a wide-ranging discussion. I wanted to make sure my family was good, the people around me, my community, and then I wanted to make sure that my leadership style, which is very much hands-on, in your face, on the ground, leading from the front, was good for the state of Florida. We've gone around all over the state in our 67 counties and had conversations. God gave us 2 ears and one mouth for a reason. And I wanted to see what was working, what wasn't working. But here's what I found out. And it's very simple. People want leadership. If you're going to be the man after Governor DeSantis, you better be able to put points on the board. They don't want people who just talk and talk on Fox News. They want people who walk and do things. And we've we've really finalized our choice, but now we're walking through this and deciding what we're going to do, how it's going to play out. And I would say stay tuned, and we'll have information here in the next couple weeks, I think, maybe. A bit more to follow. How's that?
That I take that as that's not a no. That's a open door for a possible run. Lieutenant Governor Jay Collins, thank you for joining us and speaking out against socialism and communism. And if you do.
So if you're in Florida, you vote for either Lieutenant Governor Jay Collins or Congressman Byron Donalds. That has to happen.
Let's bring in Kim Strassel, opinion columnist for the Wall Street Journal and Fox News contributor Mark Penn, former Clinton pollster and CEO of Stagwell Incorporated. So, Kim, let's begin with you. A lot of Democrats, when we look at New York City, are saying, oh, this is just a local race. This does not have national implications. But there's some people out there who believe that if MAMDANI pulls off a big victory, this could be the beginning of a socialist wave across America, at least in big blue cities. What do you think?
Yeah, it is. It is going to have national implications, John. I mean, one, for Republicans, because if MAMDANI wins, you're going to see a very easy foil be set up for President Trump and Republicans, pointing out his policies, the failures, maybe using him as an excuse to send National Guard troops in to, as the president already threatened, to cut off federal funding. And so it's going to be their poster child for where things are going for the Democratic Party. But for the Democratic Party, too, you had Andrew Cuomo there saying this is going to matter. You've already got progressives out there saying, hey, look, we've got two paths here. Look, we were running moderates in New Jersey and Virginia, and then we've got a Democratic socialist in New York, and he's doing better. That just shows that this is the future of the party. If he wins, they're going to take that as a sign that progressive Democrats are the future again, and maybe stop in the tracks some of the second thoughts Democrats have been having about what direction they need to go.
When Newsom runs in 28, they're going to say, when Newsom runs in 28, he's going to be like, listen, I'm not a Zoran Mamdani. I'm not like that. And you know what? That's okay for New Yorkers. But nationwide, I just have a different viewpoint. That's exactly how it's going to go down. And J.D. Vance is like, look, you're a communist like Zoran. J.D. Vance is going to say, look, you're a communist like Zoran Mamdani. And then Newsom's going to be like, I'm not a communist, but you know what? Listen, man, this is the same scare tactics that this is the same type of scare tactics and vile personnel insults that Trump and the MAGA are all about, man. Okay? Make the country liberal again. I was going to say make the country California. Anyway, let's continue.
So, Mark, all eyes have been on New York City, but you also have to look to Minneapolis and Seattle as well, where self-proclaimed socialists are running for mayor there. Omar Fattah in Minneapolis, Katie Wilson in Seattle. And the backing for them is splitting the party as well. For example, in Minneapolis, Omar Fattah is backed by Ilhan Omar. Jacob Frey, who is the incumbent, is backed by Tim Walz. I mean, there are a lot of people in the Democratic Party who do not.
Jacob Frey was the mayor, okay, during the terrible moment in American history when he was begging people, okay, to stop looting and rioting. He was begging his own citizenry, the same liberals who voted for him, to stop destroying Minneapolis, okay? But anyway, let's continue.
Want to see this move towards socialism. What do you say?
Well, I agree with them. Essentially, what's happened here is the DSA has glommed onto the Democratic Party and said, hey, we're Democrats. And unfortunately, the DNC leadership has said, sure, come on in. Right. It doesn't really matter if you believe things that are completely antithetical to core democratic principles. We're welcoming you if you win elections. I think that's a crazy position for a party. It's ultimately fundamentally destructive. I always remind people that in 1972 and 1984, the Democratic Party managed to reduce itself to a single state. and we could be headed for another wave. I mean, look, we see what happened in Chicago. There was a clear choice. They chose the candidate farther to the left, and now the entire city is in an uproar because of the results that they've gotten. These cities with these mayors are going to get worse results, and this I think trend has the real capability to take the party even further down, which, let's face it, it's out of power in all branches of government precisely because it's moved too far to the left.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty interesting that President Trump threw his support behind Andrew Cuomo in New York City. Cuomo is trying to run on good governance, though a lot of people would say he doesn't have a particularly great track record after being governor of New York State. It's showing that. But the appeal for Mamdani is mostly among Gen Z voters, Kimberly, who like the idea of free stuff, free buses, free childcare, low rent, things like that. But remember, as Margaret Thatcher famously said, let's put it up on the screen, the problem with socialism is that you eventually run out of other people's money, Kimberly.
That's absolutely right. And by the way, John, don't we all love other people's money? But it just doesn't really work that way. I mean, I can appreciate why Donald Trump is really putting his hat in the ring for Cuomo. Curtis Sliwa doesn't have a shot of winning this. Mm-hmm. And if the president can back a guy who, it looks as though the polls are narrowing and the gaps there and help him put in a good show, that really matters. One thing to watch here, because you make a great point. If this is just younger people and really base voters who are turning out in this election, I think that's where you get the big Mamdani lead that you've seen in some of the polls. But Cuomo's been making the point that if this is a huge turnout election and a lot of people are motivated that maybe you haven't heard from to maybe not be on board with Mamdani, then he's got a better shot.
Let's talk to my friend, New York Congresswoman Elise Stefanik.
But the reason that socialists or democratic socialists like Bernie Sanders or AOC or Zoran Mamdani are popular is because they provide electricity, they provide energy, they provide enthusiasm within the Democratic Party. They also serve as a way to funnel votes back into the Democratic Party after Democrats nationwide, so the national Democratic Party wants nothing to do with anything that AOC or Bernie Sanders or Zoran Mamdani stand for or any of their policies. It's a complete racket. Okay, it's a complete racket. But Chuck Schumer doesn't bring energy. Okay, Nancy Pelosi doesn't bring energy. A lot of, a mainstream or moderate Democrat doesn't bring electricity or enthusiasm. The policies that don't work, that make people poorer, that hurt the working class, interestingly enough, are the policies that are people are so enthusiastic about. Young people are so energetic and enthusiastic, and it brings electricity. The problem is Democrats don't want anything to do actually with the Green New Deal or single payer or anything Mamdani talks about. And so that should tell you the conundrum Democrats are in. They can't generate that type of enthusiasm without it being like a political machine. So you had wins in Virginia, but the Virginia Democratic Party is very powerful in that state. So if it's a strong political machine, yeah, they'll win within the state. Nationwide, they're not going to win unless they're not going to win against J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance has already won. If Mamdani won, it's a huge victory for J.D. Vance in 28. But nationwide, Democrats have to address the fact that the national political party, the Democratic Party, doesn't stand for and doesn't want the things Mamdani wants. On a national scale, they face an identity crisis politically, which gives the presidency to J.D. Vance. Also, they cheat their candidates. So if the DNC decides Newsom will be candidate, he'll be candidate. If the DNC decides Liz Cheney will be candidate, she'll be candidate. And if the DNC decides Liz Cheney is the Democratic nominee, Mamdani will vote for her. That's the way Democrats work.
Elise Stefanik, you're gonna save New York. Andrew Cuomo's not going to save New York. Mamdani's not going to save New York. You're going to save New York when you get to be governor next year. That's my going in talking point to you. What do you think?
Well, thank you so much, Larry. I will tell you, Zoran Mamdani is going to destroy New York, and Kathy Hochul endorsed Zoran Mamdani. She lifted him up when you have other Democrats who are hesitant because they know he is so woefully out of touch with not just Republicans and independents, but Democrats as well. He is not going to win the majority of votes, and because of this three-way race, we're now going to have a full-blown socialist. I believe he is a communist in terms of his proposals he's put forward. He is a raging anti-Semite, and you know who's given him that mouthpiece? It's Kathy Hochul, who endorsed him. Kathy Hochul is known as the worst governor in
Kathy Hochul went to Lee Zeldin during the debate. Why are you so interested in crime? She said, this is the mentality. It's like, why do you care so much about crime? Why are you obsessed with it? It's like, well, because, I don't know, it hurts people. It takes their lives, takes the lives of innocent citizens in the subway. I mean, people are losing their lives in New York subways. And, it's just unbelievable. Anyway, let's continue.
America. And I'll tell you, Larry, it's New Yorkers all across our great state who are looking for a new generation of leadership instead of the failed single-party Democrat rule led by Kathy Hochul, causing the affordability crisis, causing the crime crisis. So we got to get this mayor's race out of the way, but we cannot let down New Yorkers.
All right, Lise, hang on one second. Here's a clip from the debate last night. Cuomo beating up on Mamdani's rent control program. Here it comes. Take a listen, please.
Zoran is a great actor. He missed his calling. Freeze the rent sounds great. Yeah, it affects about 25% of the number of housing units in the city of New York. It's not a new idea. Bill de Blasio did it. It turned out to be a debacle. And it does nothing for 75% of the units. And for the 25, it just postpones the increase and actually causes us to lose.
So look at the gleeful response from Cuomo's competitor. He knows he's going to win. He knows he has the electricity, the energy and the passion. He knows there's no rebuttal to what Cuomo is saying because what Cuomo is saying is right. But that's the mentality. The progressive leftist mentality is, I'm morally superior and I don't care if buildings, aren't repaired and, businesses leave and the working class gets poorer because I'm morally superior.
Units because landlords took them off the market.
Yeah, so in some sense, it's the pot calling the kettle black because his programs were no better as governor. And, as far as rent controls, raising taxes, he was going to hike the minimum wage last night. This is, former Governor Cuomo. But it's sort of like a pox on both their houses. Curtis Lewa had the only conservative principles in the race, and I think that's important. And if I'm not mistaken, you have stood by Curtis in this mayoralty for not dropping out.
That's right.
George Pataki stood by him. Ed Cox has stood by him.
Yes, and I think the people are standing by Curtis Lewa. He has grassroots support in New York City, and it's up to the candidate to build their support. Now,
I think Curtis Lewa was fantastic from what I've seen of him. But here's the issue: they're not popular nationwide. AOC is not popular nationwide. Okay. The entire media is still propping up the Democratic Party, but 70% of Americans don't trust media because they've lied about Russiagate, they lie about the auto pen, they lie about everything. Every single scandal that Democrats have had, going back 10 years since the Clinton email debacle with top secret intelligence funneled onto secret servers. Media has gone to bat for the Democratic Party. Hollywood has gone to bat. Okay, the industries have lost tremendously. Jobs, publications, movies. People aren't going to watch movies anymore like they did. So Democrats don't have that gigantic monstrosity of a public relations apparatus propping up their political party anymore. The issue here is that nationwide, if in Virginia they have a powerful Democratic Party, great. They have a powerful Democratic Party in New Jersey as well. Nationwide, AOC is not popular. That's a fact. Nationwide, she's not as popular as President Trump or J.D. Vance or Rubio or RFK Jr. She's just not. And she's more popular than Mamdani nationwide. So what does that tell you about J.D. Vance in 2028? Hit subscribe to this channel right now. Go to H.A. Goodman's other channel as well. Subscribe there. I'll see you tomorrow, everybody. God bless you. God bless the people of New York. I wish New York City only the best. New York City, for me, has always been one of the best, most amazing, most beautiful city in the world. Or I should say most vibrant, electric, awesome city with the most wonderful, amazing people. And God bless America. God bless New York. See you